Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Henderson, editor at The Whir, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today's session is called DDoS Protection for Hosting Providers, Expand Your Cloud Offering and Protect Your Services. And it will be presented by Dave Larson, Chief Technology Officer and Vice President Product of Corero. I will let Dave introduce himself and Corero in a moment, but before I do, I want to take care of a couple of things. First of all, questions. We'll have some time at the end of the session for your questions, but you can submit them at any time using the question function in the webinar software. If you have a question and it doesn't get answered, somebody will reach out to you by email after the webinar. Or if you have a question you'd rather ask outside a public forum like this, there will be some contact info on screen during the Q&A period, so you can reach out that way as well. Finally, there will be a video archive of the webinar available if you want to rewatch the presentation or share it with someone else. It will be in the archives at thewhir.com/webinars by the end of the week, so make sure to check that out. Okay, let's get started. Welcome, Dave. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you, Nicole. It's good to be here. I'll start off with just a quick introduction. Again, my name is Dave Larson. I'm the CTO and VP Product here at Corero. I won't bore you with the details of my full bio. That can be viewed for any of you that are interested on the Corero.com website. But most recently, as I joined Corero within the last month. Most recently, I was the CTO for Hewlett-Packard's HP networking division, and prior to that, I ran product strategy for their tipping point intrusion prevention product group. So the theme of this presentation is to discuss the threats to hosting environments that are presented by distributed denial of service threat vectors. DDoS attacks and cyber threats continue to pose a significant challenge for the entire online community, but a particular challenge for hosting providers due to the nature of the architectures that are deployed. The sheer volume of customers that are within your organization and the attack surface that represents is an interesting target for those that would intend to try to compromise servers to use them for not necessarily good means. The other thing is that when you're in the business of offering a service to multiple clients, even if only one of your tenants is under attack, there can be significant collateral damage to your other hosts in terms of just reduced SLA, reduced service capability, but also there's collateral damage to your own brand and your own IP addresses if compromised equipment or infrastructure within your organization is used to launch an attack. And the ease and organization of sophisticated attacks is only getting better, so that those that would use them for monetary gain can basically buy a botnet at a very cheap price and use it to create a denial of service event. With that, we have a poll question. And we'd like to know whether or not any of you who are on the call today have been impacted in your environment from a DDoS attack. So I'll give you about 10 seconds here in order to just click the button so that we can collect this information, because this is an important category of attack, and we'd like to know how prevalent it is in your environments. With that, I would like to transition into a discussion of the various categories that can be considered part of the DDoS attack landscape. There's a variety of different attacks. The first in this is a network-level DDoS attack. You can think of this as the traditional things that were associated initially with DDoS: brute force, volumetric attacks, SYN flood attacks, things like that. In terms of the protection that is necessary, you need to be able to defend your traditional border so that a volumetric attack is not able to override the capabilities of your routers, your firewalls, your other security layer products, or in fact to be able to cease the ability to reach servers within your environment. The next category is reflective amplified DDoS attacks. You can think of this as a DNS or an NTP reflection attack, whereby a very small number of directed packets or spoof packets can be sent to servers to cause them to create, on behalf of an attacker, a large flood of activity to a targeted device without giving up their own identity as the attacker in question. In this case, the protection that you need is to be able to defend your critical network services against, again, a type of a flood, but more importantly, to defend services that you may be offering in the form of DNS or NTP from being compromised to be utilized in such an attack. When you think about these two first vectors, they both generate brute force attacks, but from the perspective of a hosting provider, they can look like they occur from different locations. The first, the brute force synthwave attack, is going to look like it's coming from outside your environment. The reflective attack may look like it's coming outside your environment, but it also may be generated from within your environment if these services can be compromised within the hosted data center. The next class of attack is a fragmented packet DDoS attack. In this case, the attackers generate malformed protocols or packets that have intentional fragmentation in the sense that they cannot be put well together again and fill up the buffers of firewalls, IPS devices in a manner that prevents them from doing the job that they were intended to do. The protection that you need in this case is clearly the protection of your security technology layer that you already have in place. You don't want the attackers to be able to obviate that. As we get further to the right, application layer DDoS attacks come into play. These are sometimes referred to as low and slow attacks. They are not the brute force variety. They are much harder to detect, and they generally are the kinds of things that are in the noise, and you need to have a very stateful capability in order to determine that this kind of attack is taking place. And in this case, your focus from a protection standpoint is defending your online business integrity for both your operation as well as your customers' online presence. In the case of an application layer attack, the objective of the attacker is to basically determine how to hold connections open without legitimate traffic running on them to prevent the actual customers or services that are trying to get to those devices from being able to access them. It's effectively a busy signal without a whole lot of bandwidth required to achieve it. In the final category, specially crafted packet attacks, in this case, you can use malformed packets that are intended to exploit well-known or even zero-day vulnerabilities that exist in the services within either your network infrastructure, your routers, your switches, or even in the servers themselves. Examples of these classes of attack include things like the Heartbleed vulnerability that has been recently prevalent in the news, and you need to be able to contemplate all of these vectors in any solution that's going to be able to provide a good first line of defense for your hosted customers. And if you're interested in more information on this, there is a SANS Institute survey that was conducted that you can access on our website. And one of the findings of that is that the most damaging DDoS attacks that are occurring in the wild now effectively mix volumetric attacks on the left-hand side with targeted application-specific attacks on the right-hand side. So it is not sufficient to just attempt to solve one of these problems. You need a holistic approach to the problem of DDoS attacks. So what does all of this mean for you and your business? What is the possible impact of an attack? Obviously, your business is about providing high availability services and applications hosted in your environment for your customers. What does downtime equate to? Well, it's obvious that downtime equates to lost revenue for your customers if they're operating a presence that's intended to generate revenue. But there are also additional costs to mitigate the attack in terms of response to customer support queries, trying to forensically determine what is happening in your environment when it's under attack, you have unhappy customers, and you have costs related to retain those customers and attract new ones if you build a reputation for having that kind of event occur in your environment. Ultimately, that results in brand damage. Ultimately, that's not good for business. So the very first consideration, a secure hosted environment is good for business. But if you consider beyond that, it probably is a revenue opportunity, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I'd like to ask another polling question to see if any of you on the line currently offer distributed denial of service protected services to your customers. So I'll give you a few seconds to answer this question. So as a follow-on to that, I'd like to discuss a little bit about how enterprises are currently preparing for this class of attack or exploit. The reason that I'm going to do that is because ultimately your goal is to try to solicit business from these organizations, and you're going to see from this data that the maybe not the vast majority, but a large segment of the enterprise population is simply not prepared for this, and it may be because they don't have sophisticated enough IT security capabilities to address the problem. In that case, it's a service offering opportunity for you from a revenue perspective if you can offer this class of protection for customers that currently don't have it. And as you can see from the data, again, from the SANS survey that I mentioned before and available on our website, 40% of enterprises are completely or mostly unprepared for DDoS. Historically, they've been investing in things like firewall technology, now next-gen firewall technology and IPSs. And yet, if they are subject or vulnerable to DDoS, that's going to obviate much, if not all, of that security protection if they don't consider this. 25% of respondents indicated they don't even have a plan. 16% were unaware of any current or future plans, and 26% believe that their existing security infrastructure is sufficient. Anyone who's been in the industry long enough to look at this problem in terms of the havoc that can be caused to a traditional firewall layer by a volumetric attack or even a targeted vulnerability attack against a security layer knows that that's not the case. It's very easy to take a firewall out of commission if there is no DDoS protection in that layer of the environment. And finally, 50% have never even tested their DDoS defense capabilities. So at the very least, there's an opportunity for hosted providers to begin a dialogue with prospective enterprise customers about whether or not they would be better served by a protected cloud. Enterprises don't want to move their unprotected services that they already are running in there, or maybe not totally unprotected, but they're insufficiently protected services in their enterprise private data centers into an unprotected cloud. Hosting providers have an opportunity to differentiate and use DDoS as a way to create both new revenue and a value proposition to attract customers. And I'd like to discuss the types of services that can be created from a DDoS perspective. So hosting providers have a variety of different opportunities, and these are just some samples of the kinds of services that you might be able to create, and there are others as well. First, just a straight DDoS and cyber threat protection service that guarantees clean pipe to the hosted services that are running in your environment should be attractive for many of your enterprise customers. Moreover, you can create both security and performance SLAs in the sense that you can both mitigate attacks from a DDoS vector perspective, and in so doing, guarantee and monitor and show that the performance to the hosted assets in your environment is meeting the SLAs that you have agreed to with your customers. On top of this, we provide a very strong visibility and reporting capability that allows you real-time and historical analytics to actually show the efficacy of the services that you have in place, or to forensically look at any issues that have occurred in your environment and to begin to tailor your environment to be better prepared against these class of attacks. Ultimately, the ability to provide a virtual security operations center could be very attractive for a whole range of customers that simply do not have the capability of operating their own SOC and could rely on you as their security provider to give them a virtual SOC capability that allows them the ability to report on security events in their hosted environment, to attest for regulatory compliance reasons, and just basically to have good visibility into the capabilities that you are providing to them as a trusted partner. So I'd like to follow that up again with a polling question to see whether you believe that these types of value-add services could set your business apart from the competition and allow for additional revenue stream, as I am conjecturing here in this presentation. And I'll give you a few seconds to click the radio buttons. So at this point, I'd like to drill down a little bit further into the components of threat defense functionality that is necessary in your environment to be considered in terms of the types of security capability that you will need in order to mitigate against DDoS and other cyber threats. First, you want to mitigate against undesired users and services. Realistically, your customers have an expectation that you're only going to allow expected traffic to their devices, traffic that they actually want to arrive at their servers. You want to block malicious IP addresses, unwanted geolocations, and allow only desired ports and services. Essentially, you want to restrict access to only legitimate business traffic. You also want to be able to mitigate against DDoS attacks and competitive abuse. What do I mean by competitive abuse? There's a monetary or business incentive in a competitive environment to take your competitor offline, and if you can do that through an undetectable or unattributable DDoS attack to your business, maybe there are some organizations that would try to use that as a competitive advantage. You need to be able to take that out of the equation. At the very top layer, it's about evaluating the amount of traffic, limiting the rates, and not allowing any brute force vector to take any of your customers' assets offline in your hosted environment. As we continue down in the sophistication of the defense capabilities, we look at protocol validation. You need to enforce the correctness of traffic. As I mentioned, there are a variety of different approaches beyond brute force that can be utilized to deny service to a hosted entity. And an easy way is to create a protocol violation that might cause either confusion or state issues or even buffer overflows within the infrastructure of your routers, switches, or even your servers. So you need to be able to enforce protocols so that they cannot be used in malformed ways to create outages. And then finally, there are targeted server attacks. You need to be able to analyze the integrity of the traffic and to not allow malformed packets or targeted vulnerability exploits into your environment that are intended to compromise servers for the point of either denial of service or even worse, for intrusion and root access that leads to data leakage and compromise of an enterprise's assets in your environment. And finally, you need to be able to provide visibility into unwanted traffic. You need to see that you're under attack, be able to know that you are mitigating, but you also get the ancillary benefit of seeing that your valid traffic is meeting its SLA commitments. All of this translates into a protected cloud service opportunity. So yes, your customers don't want undesired users or services accessing their equipment in your hosted environment. This allows you if you implement these capabilities, this tier of security services, to offer multi-tenant secure hosting. The ability to say that your tenants hosted in your environment will remain free of traffic, either externally to your environment from a DDoS perspective or internally. There will be no crosstalk. You'll be able to offer guaranteed bandwidth SLAs that indicate that even under attack, you'll be able to allow good traffic through the perimeter and to the servers, allowing business transactions to continue even under duress. You'll be able to offer L3 and L4 security services. You'll be able to protect physical and virtual infrastructure from fragmented attacks, from targeted vulnerability exploits at layer 3 and layer 4. And ultimately, you'll be able to offer layer 7 application security services that prevent intrusions into the environment, exploitations of things like Heartbleed, and a better experience for your customers. Again, as I mentioned, visibility is critical to your value proposition here, and a real opportunity to drive home the benefit of the security layers and the services listed above is in the form of a virtual security operations center or a portal that can be made available to your end users so that they can see the effect and the mitigation of events in their environment. Apologize. And analytics that allow them to report to their compliance regulators that show that even in a hosted environment, the assets that they have placed there are still meeting the security requirements that the regulations demand. So what does this look like in terms of actual attacks on the wire, and how would we characterize a DDoS attack? In this case, I'm going to use the example of an NTP attack. NTP is a network time protocol, and it is a classic service that is vulnerable to reflective attacks that can create well-masked brute force attacks in a spoofed manner. In the graph that I am showing on the screen now, this attack example is showing inbound traffic in the color blue, outbound traffic in the color yellow, and you can see on the left-hand side that there is a massive spike, an increase of about 2.5 gigabits per second in a very short duration of time that indicates that there is some form of an NTP attack. In this case, it is response packets from monolith requests that are overwhelming an address within the hosted environment. And in this current case, I'm just showing the actual effect of the bandwidth. There's no mitigation. There's nothing here. This is just what would the attack look like in real time. You can also see the same attack in terms of packets per second, and you can see that there's a 600,000 packet increase in packets per second during the duration of that attack. This is not unusual, and this class of attack is very easily instrumented by attackers without having to create this bandwidth on their own. They basically use the effective vulnerability in many legacy NTP servers that they will respond to a monolith request and provide information about all of the hosts that have been recently querying that NTP server. In doing that, you just send a request to the NTP server, and suddenly it responds with a tremendous amount of traffic. And if you are able to spoof the source address of that request, you can get many NTP servers, if you know where they reside and you know their vulnerabilities, to focus an attack in real time on some desired target. And you need to be able to block that. As I just mentioned, the NTP example, in this case, you can see the additional threat of inbound monolith requests looking for NTP servers in your environment. So not only are you susceptible to NTP attacks external to your data centers, but in reality, you may be hosting NTP servers within your data center that may be vulnerable to this kind of request, a monolith request from a spoofed IP address. you need to be able to determine that that is taking place so that you can block those malicious requests. More importantly, even if those requests were to get through, you need to be able to have a bidirectional security approach that doesn't allow NTP servers within your environment to participate unknowingly in an attack on something inside your data center or external to your data center, because that's collateral damage to your hosted customers. More importantly, it creates an IP reputation issue for the IP addresses associated with those servers within your environment. So I've painted a fairly bleak picture in terms of the amount of tools and assets at disposal for those that would like to do harm to you and your customers. However, for the balance of this presentation, I'd like to discuss our approach or our solution to this problem, which is the SmartWall threat defense system. At a high level, the SmartWall threat defense system is tailored for high bandwidth locations and hosted providers, carriers, service providers, because we've taken an approach at Corero to look at this problem as scaling in increments of 10 gigabits per second, and doing so in a very economical and efficient way. So we are able to scale our deployments of line rate 30 million packet per second, 10 gigabit mitigation of DDoS attacks in a 10 gig device, slimline appliance, that occupies only a quarter of a single rack unit space in your racks. What that means is we can scale our solution arbitrarily large to meet the needs of the edge of your network and the bandwidth that you are consuming as you grow. You can get 40 gig today in a single rack unit, 160 gig, as you can see, in 4 rack units, and there is no significant limit on the higher bound of the bandwidth that you can contain in a cluster of SmartWall threat defense systems. We integrate directly to your switched infrastructure. We take advantage of the flow provisioning capability of your environment, and we provide common policy across this entire array in a manner that will meet the needs of virtually any bandwidth requirement. In addition, we have a do no harm philosophy here at Corero. We will pass all good traffic with no false positives. We will mitigate all known bad traffic. We will let none of it through. The good traffic is green in this depiction. The known bad traffic is red in this depiction. We recognize that there's never a fully binary situation where all traffic is bad, or half of the traffic is bad, half of the traffic is good. There is always either additional inspection or policy that can be brought to bear on either suspicious traffic or other forms or layers of security that may be necessary in order to determine the policy associated with traffic. And that can be implemented either by firewalls, intrusion prevention systems. It can be mitigated in the application layer itself in the virtual machines, the virtual environment of your hypervisors. So we mitigate, we protect against overload, we monitor all traffic passing through our system to provide you the analytics of what is happening. We also provide logical bypass on these units such that in the event of some kind of a system failure or an overload beyond 10 gigabits per second, we still allow all good traffic through the system. For those of you that are familiar with using optical bypass technology in a manner to protect against this kind of thing, or a power failure for that matter, we also offer a complementary network bypass appliance that is tightly integrated with the SmartWall and with the Corero management system that manages and provisions our technology in a cluster that can meet your needs. So now I would like to return to a discussion of attack detection and mitigation in the graphical format that I presented earlier. You'll recall that I presented an NTP attack scenario And in this case, I would like to talk about what we can do with SmartWall to both detect and mitigate against these class of attacks. If you'll recall, in the previous description, blue represented the inbound NTP attack. Yellow is outbound traffic. In this case, that is still the same, but you'll see that there is now a red line that represents the fact that we are 100% characterizing that attack as, in fact, 600K packets per second of mon-list responses. This is obviously not normal behavior and is something that should be able to be mitigated. If you utilize our product in a monitor-only mode, our system is capable of alerting to the effect that this attack is underway. However, there is a better way of dealing with that, and that is to allow our product to deploy it and provision it in a manner that not only will it detect the attack, it will mitigate that attack in real time. This is a real example that was conducted against one of our customers, and you can see the 600K mon-list attack that occurred in a very tight span of time has been completely mitigated. Blue is again inbound, yellow is again outbound, and you can see that there is absolutely no presence of a spike on the blue line, which shows that we are completely mitigating this attack in this case. And now I would like to spend some time just showing you how you could imagine utilizing our SmartWall threat defense system in right-sized solutions that might be applicable to your bandwidth needs in your environment. The first, on the top of this slide, is a 10 gig active 1RU mitigation environment. It's effectively 20 gig or 60 million packets per second of inspection, but it integrates full optical bypass in the event of power failure. Both of the 10 gig links stay up in all cases, allowing you to have a 20 gig, 10 gig active configuration, full DDoS mitigation in a single rack unit. If your bandwidth needs are significantly higher than that, if you are already terminating 40 gig links, we can scale this to a 40 gig active or an 80 gig N+1 redundant, gracefully degrading solution in 2 rack units. In this case, we remove the optical bypass capability. Of course, you could incorporate it similar to the example given above, but as you scale your links to 40 gig, you now have the capability of taking advantage of flow link aggregation from your infrastructure across each of the 40 gig segments of this 80 gig solution in a way that if one of the systems were to go away from a power, you would gracefully degrade the performance on that to 30 gigabits. And in many cases, that is acceptable for our hosting provider customers. But in any case, you can support it as a fully bypass protected if you wish, but you have much more flexibility as you grow the bandwidth capability into the 40, 80 gig range and beyond. This depiction is intended to give you a sense of how we achieve what I just described in the talking points that I utilized on the previous slide. In the 10 gig high availability configuration with bypass, you can see here that on the left-hand side is one of the 10 gig links. On the right-hand side is the other active 10 gig link. The gray lines on the top left-hand side, you can see they come into the optical bypass. It is then transitioned from the network bypass unit over to the SmartWall threat defense system, handed back to the optical bypass, and then down to the server or infrastructure equipment within your cloud. And we repeat that on the right-hand side of the system. In the event of a power failure, those optical bypasses will fail closed, which means that the optical integrity maintains even when there is no power, and traffic continues to flow. Obviously, we are not providing any kind of monitoring and mitigation in that event, but it allows for complete uptime in an ephemeral failure environment from a power standpoint in the rack and allows you to very quickly recover as the power returns. The next is a schematic depiction of the 40 gig HA configuration that I described earlier. In this case, you can see that we are now utilizing the switch infrastructure at the top to provide link aggregation groups. In this case, for a 40 gig HA configuration, you would provide two groups of four-lane link aggregation, one on the left, one on the right, and you would do the same thing at the bottom, one on the left, one on the right, that allows 40 gig through the system and a 40 gig HA active-active topology. Obviously, there's no strict requirement to do this, but if you had 40 gig active links and you wanted to provide this capability, then you may choose this topology. It's obvious that you don't need the demarcation line in the middle if you prefer to use this as an 80 gig graceful degradation redundant system. You can actually create link aggregation groups at the top and bottom of 8 links, and if there is any single failure, the link aggregation capability will reprovision the flows of traffic, and our policy is consistent across all of the members of the cluster such that all the mitigation will continue. You'll just be degraded to 70 gigabits per second instead of at the full capability of 80. So as you can see, we have a very flexible capability of providing topologies that match the needs of our hosting provider customers, regardless of the bandwidth requirements that they have at the edge of their networks. More importantly, we can grow in 10 gig increments as your needs evolve and your business grows to accommodate higher bandwidth services, more customers, larger data centers. And we recognize that the 10 gig quanta is the natural way that you are going to add bandwidth into your environment. And so we have purposely built a solution to accommodate your growth in a manner that meets your economic needs without forcing you to buy in exorbitant systems in 40 gig or 100 gig links or increments, where you know that the actual price to provide this kind of mitigation is never linear as you move into the higher and emerging bandwidth scenarios. So a 10 gig solution is likely to scale with your needs today. It allows you to build in a consistent manner to meet the bandwidth requirements of your environment and to add as necessary as your needs grow and evolve. And finally, I'd like to spend a little time talking about the benefits of visualization of this information, of a virtual security operations center, the need to be able to validate that this technology is in place, that it is providing benefit, that it is mitigating against events in a manner that it is intended to, and that you can attest both to your own organization and to your customers' organizations that the SLAs that you have committed to are being met, to be able to provide additional security visualization services to your customers in the form of virtual SOCs, that they can rely on you to give visibility to their environment so that they can see how their hosted assets are being protected and how they are performing from an SLA perspective in the hosted data center. In this case, I'm showing just some example of the detailed usage dashboards that are available as a part of our system that allow you to have instantaneous and historical visibility into your environment. You can see on the top left indication about what is the bandwidth in and out of your system. Then you can see what are the number of flow setups that are taking place against any given period in time. We also break it down to packets. So you can see packet rates. You can see if there is a spike in packet rates that might indicate some kind of an attack. And you can see flow setup rates that allow you to understand the connection setup frequency that is occurring in your environment. All of this is valuable, and this is just an example of the types of traffic that we provide just for general visibility. But we also allow you some drill down capability and some summary dashboards that actually bring to your attention events and topics of interest. We allow you to see top blocked events, for example, with a drill down on each component that will give you some context as to the frequency with which a rule is firing, the general timeline with which a rule is firing. You can see if it's in a single spike or if it's a long-lived, slower duration attack that is just persistent. In this case, the top portion of the graph is showing the top blocked events by rule within the system. Each of those lines, each of those squiggly lines represents a single rule. You can highlight that rule and see just the shape of that particular line. And then below, you see that we have detailed drill down information on the rule that you can't really see it on the text, I don't believe, is probably not a large enough font, but you can see the actual number of events that have fired. On the right-hand side, you can see a timeline of the frequency of that event arrival for that specific event in time, and you can drill down on this to get more forensics information. It allows you an ability to determine what is happening in your environment. You can also use all of these things can be tied to alerts so that your IT security personnel can be alerted in the event that something has gone beyond the normal behavior of an environment or beyond a background or has been identified as a significant threat to your hosted environment. This is just an example. We would certainly be happy to talk to any of you on the call and give you a more detailed overview of our entire solution from SmartWall and then our security event summary virtual portal capability as well that we'll be announcing in the next couple of weeks. And we'd be happy to go into any detail on our solution that might resonate with your environment. With that, I would like to thank you for offering me the time to speak with you about this exciting and interesting opportunity that has been presented to us in terms of the ability to provide real, effective security against a very sophisticated form of attack, thereby protecting our customers, generating real goodwill with that organization, but more importantly, creating new revenue streams associated with the ability to deliver services that our customers want and, in fact, that they desperately need. So with that, Nicole, I'm going to turn this back over to you. I know we have some time left on here, maybe 15 minutes or so for Q&A.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Dave. So just a reminder to everyone, you have the option to ask questions through the Q&A widget as part of On24 platform. So if you have a question, please feel free to submit it that way, and I will turn the question over to Dave. It looks like we've got the first question here is from a hosting provider. How could I know if I have hosted sites, servers, etc., that are vulnerable to DDoS attacks and cyber threats?
That's a very good question, and I don't mean to denigrate the question, but if you have infrastructure or servers, you are vulnerable. It's just the very presence that you have created on the network itself. Actually, not only are you vulnerable, but you're a target. You are a high bandwidth resource to the bad guys. They know that hosted environments have large pipes onto the internet in general, and if they can compromise the servers and infrastructure assets behind that pipe, then they have a very powerful tool that they can use to wreak havoc. So just the very nature of your business alone actually makes you a more high-profile target for this class of exploit than, in fact, a typical enterprise with a single gigabit or even less link into their private data center. So, I'm glad this question was asked because it actually highlights the fact that if anybody should be thinking about this class of security service, it's folks with high bandwidth links to the internet. And hosting providers, by definition, have higher bandwidth links into the internet, and they have also less control over the actual infrastructure and services and applications that are deployed in their environment. It's very difficult for you to go and audit and determine that the end users, enterprises that are hosting services on your environment aren't hosting vulnerable services on your environment. It's very difficult to set a requirement that everything be clean and scanned and known to be free of vulnerabilities. So the host providers themselves For the first point, they don't want their systems compromised for obvious reasons because it's going to be collateral damage to your customers, but it creates a brand issue for you, as I mentioned earlier. You don't want to be known either from an IP reputation standpoint associated with your site as something that's launching regular attacks into the internet generally, because it'll create situations where IP reputation capabilities of products like ours and others will begin to blacklist the environment associated with your data centers. So I think it's imperative on this class of organization to really think about this problem because they are such high-profile targets to be exploited. Thank you, Nicole.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks. The next question here is related more specifically to Corero. What attack types does Corero protect against?
That's a good question, and I think it should appear obvious to you, but you're right to ask the question. I should state it explicitly. If we look back at that at the very beginning of the presentation, we were talking about the 5 categories, and I'll see if I can push this back to the desktop. The 5 categories of volumetric network level DDoS attacks, reflective amplified DDoS attacks, fragmented attacks, application layer attacks, and specially crafted packets. We provide solutions at Corero across all of this continuum. It is vastly important for high bandwidth locations in the internet, particularly at carrier peering points, at hosted provider entry into the network, to mitigate against volumetric attacks. And I think that is the place that I would highlight where people need to have solutions. If you're going to have 10 gig pipes, multiples of them, 40 gig interconnects, 100 gig interconnects, you need to be able to have a volumetric solution that scales with that capability, prevents incoming attacks to your environment, but more importantly also enables you to ascertain with complete confidence that your environment cannot be used to launch attacks. So we have solutions that provide capability across this entire spectrum, but I would focus on the ability to at least weed out the volumetric attacks and think of that as a first line of defense in the carrier space. But all of these requirements are necessary in a complete first line of defense or a defense in depth approach to your edge of your network.
Okay, thanks. So then the next question asks, does this solution scale to support multiple hosted customers?
Yes, again, a good question. So it necessarily scales to support multiple hosted customers. We are delivering a solution that scales arbitrarily in 10 gig increments with a consistent policy set across the entire array. We don't expect a hosted environment to have customers that are actually consuming 10 gig, although I expect that there are a small number that are. So our solution is intended to provide protection against the entire hosted infrastructure, both the infrastructure that is providing the hosted services themselves and the hosted applications of your enterprise customers. So yes, we are able to secure and support the mitigation of DDoS attacks across the entire environment, regardless of the number of hosted tenants that you have.
Okay, great. So we've got another question here. How is this solution different from a scrubbing center or traffic rerouting service?
It's different than a scrubbing center in the sense that it's not its own unique location specifically that you are sending traffic to make sure that it is being mitigated. You can think about this as a tightly integrated layer of your hosted environment. However, it's providing much of the capability of a scrubbing center, and it's doing it without the need of shunting information off to a scrubbing center. In fact, there are many scrubbing centers that employ our technology to create the capability that they are selling services to your customers for. So you can think about this similar to the problem that the large service providers have, is that they're providing bandwidth to customers, and yet the revenue for interesting content and services that is flowing over their networks is going to over-the-top applications like Netflix. this is an obvious analogy for hosting providers. If you are just providing hosting and no security services, you are missing an opportunity to generate revenue for yourself, and you are allowing that revenue to go to a scrubbing center, to a managed security hosted environment that is on behalf rerouting traffic for the hosted applications that your environment is maintaining and creating the services revenue for somebody else. Our argument is if you've already made the investment in the bandwidth and the infrastructure to host at the scale that's necessary to support your business, you should be securing that environment as well and deriving a monetary and revenue benefit by offering security services to your customer that meet the same requirements that they might be able to achieve by an external scrubbing or reroute system. Nicole, are there any other questions?
Okay. No, that's it, but I was hoping that you'd be able to talk a little bit about what Corero is doing at HostingCon 2014, which is actually coming up in a couple short weeks here.
Yes. So we will be, I don't have the booth number, but we will be at, oh, I have it right here. It's on the slide. Number 229, we're going to be at HostingCon. We are very excited to be participating in this event, meeting with the community of hosting providers and being able to have discussions. I myself am going to be there, and I'm looking forward to and eagerly anticipating and soliciting conversations with folks who are responsible for the security of hosted data centers and want to have discussions about how our technology could be brought to bear to build new services and revenue opportunities for them. Even more, for folks who have ideas about things that I have not talked about on this particular presentation that would like to discuss other forms of security or services that might be beneficial in a similar vein to what we are offering. So yeah, we're going to be participating in this event. We're looking forward to it. We're going to be there with quite a few of our folks here at Corero, and we're looking forward to the conversations with the community at large.
Great. Thanks, Dave. So that's about all the time we've got left. If you have any follow-up questions as you're maybe checking out the archive later this week and you want to get in touch with Dave or someone else at Corero to get some answers to those burning questions you have, you can contact Corero at info@corero.com, and you can also visit their website for more information. It's www.corero.com. And as Dave mentioned, they'll be at HostingCon 2014 as well in Miami, so you can visit them there in person at booth number 229. So that's all the time we've got for today. I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And Dave, thank you so much. I learned so much about DDoS attacks and what hosting providers can do to protect their customers.
Thank you, Nicole. I really enjoyed it, and I'd like to also extend my thanks to the audience online. And again, just send out that request. If you have any further questions or you'd like to have this discussion, come see us at the show or send us an email. We'd be happy to engage because we believe that this is a really interesting and exciting opportunity for our customers. And we're really looking to build some partnerships and explore some ways that we can really succeed together. So thank you, Nicole, and thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.